I just want to open it up and say thank you for being here and welcome all of you to this conversation. So, Linda, let me hand it to you. I know that you've gathered some questions in advance. Why don't we kick it off with one of those?
One area had to do with kind of juggling that. How do I save for retirement when price of everything is kind of going up right now and I've got to pay my bills and keep up with my bills? How do I do that and save and plan for retirement, finding that balance?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, because as we've seen over the past 6 months to a year, we're experiencing more inflation than we have in a while, and on big things. It's not just milk and eggs and butter; it's homes and cars and the other big ticket items that you may be asked to pay for. On the flip side, we've also seen wage gains that we haven't seen in some time, and I'd like to just note that sometimes when we get a raise, human beings, because we are human, we adapt to that increased wage very, very quickly. We put it to work, we spend it, we celebrate a little bit, and it's not very long before we forget that we knew how to live on less. And this is where careful monitoring of your spending comes in. So I have yet to see a budget where I couldn't find some wiggle room. But the key to finding that wiggle room in order to make sure that we've got enough money flowing into those retirement accounts is careful tracking of our spending. It's making sure that we know where our money goes and that we are consciously choosing where we want our money to go. The other flip side of the inflationary pressures that we've been feeling are that interest rates have remained low. And so if you have yet to lock into lower long-term interest rates that will benefit you not just this year, but down the road, you want to do that sooner rather than later. The Federal Reserve was just out a day ago indicating that by the start of next year, they are going to look to start raising interest rates, and mortgage rates, for one thing, are going to go up in advance of those increases. So I'd say pay very careful attention to your spending. Make sure that you know where your money is going. Make sure that you've locked into every long-term interest rate at a very low rate that you can. And this is not just limited to your mortgage. We can refinance a car loan. The credit union does that all the time. Student loans can be refinanced. Credit card debts can be refinanced if you've improved your credit. So these are all ways to bring down our monthly costs so that we can make sure that we can flow enough money into those retirement accounts. And the other thing we have to do is just understand that saving for tomorrow is not really optional. It's something that you have to do year in and year out in order to get you where you want to go.
And paying yourself first. I know you talk a lot about pay yourself first. I mean, kind of thinking about making saving for retirement a priority.
The reason that 401ks work is because they're automatic, because the money comes out of your paycheck automatically before you see it or you touch it. And so you don't spend it. You want to get yourself to the point where you are routinely putting away 15% of your pay. And that can include, by the way, any matching dollars that you receive from an employer for retirement. If you're not there, you want to try to nudge your saving up by 1 or 2% every single year until you get there. And if, like so many people these days, you don't work for a company that has a 401k, maybe you work for a smaller company that doesn't offer one, the thing to do is to kind of hack your way into a similar system by making automatic transfers whenever your paycheck lands out of checking and into an IRA or a Roth IRA. Lori, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find if there is a happy balance. I understand having pre-tax dollars put aside, but I've also seen when you're drawing it out, what that means when you're limited on resources, suddenly having to pay taxes on it compared to post-tax for retirement. So what is the balance or ratio we should be looking at?
Yeah, I don't know that there is an exact ratio of pre-tax to post-tax. So what Lori's talking about, everyone, is if your 401k offers the option of doing a Roth 401k as compared to a traditional 401k, or if you are on an IRA system doing a Roth IRA versus a traditional IRA. And with a Roth, you pay the taxes before you make the contribution. And then you never have to pay taxes again. That money can grow tax-free forever. When you withdraw it at retirement, you don't have to pay income taxes at your current rate. On the flip side, with a traditional instrument, you get a tax deduction for making the contribution when the money does grow, again, tax deferred, but when you pull it out in retirement, you pay income taxes at your current rate. Look, we're trying to get people to the point where they are able to put aside 10 to 15%. I say 15%, that's my goal for everyone, because I know that if you can consistently put away 15%, the chances that you'll be able to, with Social Security, replace about 85% of your pre-retirement income are pretty good. And that's about what it takes to maintain your standard of living in retirement. If you can't get there, aim for 10, and then we'll nudge your way up. But if the paying of the taxes is such a hardship that it doesn't enable you to put away enough money, then I'd say put away the pre-tax dollars and don't sweat it. And down the road, you'll put away post-tax dollars, or maybe you'll do a Roth conversion. Our financial lives, they go in cycles. And I don't know how many of you have kids, but I have two. And I know my financial life really went in cycles. And as my kids were in high school, and especially when both of them were in college at the same time, those were my very heavy spending years. And I knew that I was not going to be able to heavy up my retirement contributions during those years. But when they got out, and then a little bit further down the road than that, when they actually got jobs and I didn't have to support them as much, I was able to put more into retirement. So we aim for these numbers, these benchmarks, but we understand that we may not be able to always get there. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Stephanie, you had a question about the limits.
Yeah, I just 15% seems like a lot. That kind of hit me a bit.
You know what? It does seem like a lot. There's no question, and particularly if you're not near that now. But more is better, and we start where we are, right? We just start where we are. So if you're saving 2 or 3% now, that's great. Continue saving that. And as you start earning more money, try to nudge your percentage up by 1% a year, 2% a year, if you can do it. I would not try to nudge it up by more than that. I would just sort of take these small steps, knowing that if you do, 1.5% a year as a nudge, and you start at 3%, well, in 4 years, you're going to be at 9%. And that's really close to 10%. And eventually you're going to get there. So don't look at it as I have to be there tomorrow. There are ways to make up ground on the back end. Every additional 6 months that we work on the back end of our careers is equal to about a 1% increase in the amount that we've saved for our retirements over our lifetimes, because during those later years, we're not pulling money out of the stock market and out of our retirement portfolios. We're giving Social Security additional time to grow. It's really, really powerful. So don't get stuck on these benchmarks. They're the right benchmarks, but if it takes you a little bit of time to get there, that's just fine. Windfalls can be really, really powerful. If you get a tax refund, and many people get tax refunds, and this was one of those years where a lot of us got stimulus dollars, or there is additional money flowing your way because of the child tax credit. Use those windfalls to move you down the road a little bit.
And a couple people had asked questions about, like, if they get inheritance, what's the best way to use it? Pay down the debt, like on their mortgage, or to put it into their retirement.
Absolutely. Let's talk about that, and then Patty and Nancy and everyone else that we'll get to your questions. So if you get a windfall, I think it's first very important to think about why you're getting this windfall. What is it? Where is it coming from? A tax refund is emotionally very, very different than an inheritance. An inheritance is going to come with a lot of baggage. And so if you're getting a tax refund, I think you can make a decision on the numbers and put it to work. And we'll talk about that in a second. If you're getting an inheritance, I think it's important to sit on it for a good 6 months. Just park it in savings and think about what you really want to do with this money before you take any action with it, because those are the sort of windfalls that don't come along very often. That said, whenever we have a sum of money that we need to put to work, the question becomes, all right, what's the trade-off? As you said, should I use it to pay off my mortgage? Should I use it to pay off my high interest rate credit card debt? Should I invest it for retirement? Should I pay down my student loan? And the rule of thumb, whenever you're paying off a debt, is that the return on your money is equal to the interest rate minus any sort of a tax benefit. So if you are paying off a mortgage and that mortgage is at 3%, that is a 3% return on your money. That's not very good. That a mortgage is cheap money. If you're paying off a student loan and that student loan is at 6%, that's a 6% return on your money minus any sort of tax benefits. That's okay. It's medium. If you're paying off a high interest rate credit card at 19%, that's a guaranteed 19% return on your money. And that is spectacular. You're not going to get that in the market. And so when we try to balance these either ors, we look at the return on our money. And so generally, the hierarchy is that if you have a 401k with matching dollars, those matching dollars provide anywhere from like a 25% to a 50% to a 100% return on your money, guaranteed, depending on the match. So you want to grab those first. Then we look at the high interest rate credit card debt and we try to get rid of that. And then we look at the other things that we can do to get a decent return on our money, including investing it. And you should have a plan for how you want to put this money to work, what you want to do with it, line it up with your goals before you put it to use. Let's see, Nancy.
Thank you. So we're getting ready to retire soon, and I just wondered if there's some kind of suggestions or theory about budgeting for when you are retired. Like, can you spend more? This is my hope. In the first couple of years, so you could travel and while you're mobile, with the idea that as you get older, you might not be spending so much, or am I just making that up?
No, you're totally not making it up. That is how it works for most people. They say that retirement comes in 3 phases: the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years, right? And that's just, how active people tend to be in retirement. The trick is making sure that your fixed costs are covered, that you know what your fixed costs are, and that you understand how much above that you're able to spend so that your money will live as long as you do. There are a lot of different ways to go about covering for those costs and for the extras. People used to do it with pensions, right? They used to understand how much pension income they would have coupled with Social Security that would provide them with the money that they were going to live on for the rest of their lives, perhaps with a cost of living increase, but they knew what to expect. The scenario for us today is different. Most of us don't have pensions. And so the goal as we come to retirement is to figure out how to solve for those income needs. Social Security is a big factor in that for many people. And you want to be really careful about your decision on when and how to pull the trigger on Social Security. In general, the higher earning person in a couple should be waiting as long as possible with a cap of age 70 before taking Social Security. And the reason for that is that Social Security, for every year that you wait from age 62 to age 70, you get an 8% bump in benefits in Social Security. And that's a return that is really difficult to meet in any other way because it's guaranteed. Then you look at the gap between what Social Security will cover and your other fixed expenses. And you think about, okay, how am I going to solve for that? One way to do it is by maintaining your investment portfolio and withdrawing at typically a 3.5% to 4% rate. That you've probably heard the 4% rule. That's what people are talking about when they talk about the 4% rule. And it generally goes that if you pull only 4% a year out of your retirement portfolio, it should last you about 30 years. It depends. It depends on what the markets are doing, particularly in your early years of retirement, but it's a decent barometer. The other thing that people do is take a chunk of their retirement portfolio and annuitize. They buy a stream of income. They buy a paycheck, essentially, that will cover the gap between what Social Security will cover and the rest of their needs, knowing that they can use the remaining money in their 401k or retirement account and withdraw it and use it to pay for those other things that we want, especially during the go-go years of retirement. The last factor is healthcare. And healthcare and long-term care are the wild card. They typically don't kick in until the latter phase of retirement, but in our 80s, we tend to see healthcare expenses ramp up pretty significantly. And that's why I think it's a really good idea as you think about heading into retirement to sit down with a financial advisor, even if it's just for a meeting or two, and do some scenario running. How long will my money last if I invest it like this? How long will my money last if I continue to work part-time? How long will my money last if I pull out X, Y, and Z dollars? And I don't know, Nancy, if that's something that you have done. But if you haven't, I think it would be a smart move.
Thank you for that. Can you just clarify fixed costs are what? Like
fixed costs are housing, transportation, utilities, food, taxes, healthcare.
Okay.
Anything that you're committed to every single month. If you live in a place where there's a homeowners association and that's a predictable cost, that's a fixed cost. The variable costs are the vacations, the eating out, the things that it's kind of wants versus needs.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
The extras.
Absolutely. Linda, do you want to go for one before I take another one, or should I take another one from the chat?
Yeah, one of the common themes was people's concern about outliving their money.
Yeah.
And having enough. I mean, like keywords that were kind of jumping out in people's questions and where they were concerned.
You know that I've got some benchmarks here. And I'll throw them out, but I do, and let me just apologize about the phone. I don't know why it's ringing out loud. My son got promoted today and he's very excited. Yeah, exactly. So in terms of knowing that you have enough, there are some benchmarks that were developed by financial institutions that basically show you that you will have enough to live on. At the time you retire, you want to aim to have about 10 times your final income. And that will, for people who earn between $50,000 a year and $300,000 a year, provide enough to cover with Social Security about 85% of your pre-retirement income, which should be enough. That said, it depends. It depends on where you're living, right? If you're living in a house that you've paid off, or you've decided that you're going to downsize, your retirement costs may be substantially less than your pre-retirement costs. If you decide that you are going to move out of the area where you raised your kids because the schools were so fabulous into a town that doesn't have such high taxes, your costs are going to be less. If you make a decision that you're going to live more frugally, your costs are going to be less. And if you make a decision that you're going to work at least part-time, your costs are going to be less. And working in retirement is something that 2/3 of people actually do, right? We call it retirement. We're really not retired. We're just not doing the same job that we did when we were working 40 hours a week. That's a meaningful addition to the retirement budget, and it may mean that you don't need to meet those benchmarks. The other thing is, if you are one of those very fortunate people who happens to have a pension, and about 17% of people in the country still do have a pension, you don't need to hit that benchmark. You only need to hit the amount that the pension won't cover. So if you know that the pension, for example, is going to cover, and the aim of this 10% is to really cover about 45% of your pre-retirement income. So if you know that the pension is going to cover 15% of your pre-retirement income, then you only have to cover the other 30%. Does that make sense?
Did you say 85% before of your pre-retirement income?
I did. So when combined with Social Security,
okay, with
10%,
Social Security.
Yeah, when combined with Social Security, the 10% will cover your pre-retirement income. The Social Security decision is really not one that should be taken lightly. I mean, I sort of glossed over it and said, wait as long as you can, but that's not the right decision for everybody. If you wait until age 70, you typically have to live till 85 or older in order for the math to make up for not having taken your Social Security earlier. And the situation gets more complicated if you are divorced, if you are widowed, or if there is a large age discrepancy between you and your spouse. And in those cases, I really recommend paying for one of the Social Security calculators on the market to run a scenario for you and just say, this is the right thing to do. There's one called Maximize My Social Security that was developed by an economist in Boston named Larry Kotlikoff. I think he's at Boston College. He may be at Boston University. I always sort of get it confused. But it's $40 and it tells you what's the right thing to do. There's another one called Social Security Solutions. It's a little more expensive, but if you want to talk to a live human being about the right decision, that's a good thing to do. If you've got a financial advisor, they often have a version of the software that can help you make this decision. And so it's a really, really important decision, and you don't want to punt. We've got one from it looks like Barone, or I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, but if you'd like to unmute and talk us through your situation, that would be great.
Jean, my situation is that I work for the school department, and I have Maine State Retirement. I have a Maine State Retirement pension, but of course it's a small one because I'm not a teacher. I work as an ed tech there. And I also worked for many years for companies that I paid into Social Security. So my retirement problem is going to be the government pension offset and the windfall elimination provision. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how I'm going to be able to manage my retirement with these two.
Yeah, it's not really a fair shake. It's, for everybody who's listening, sometimes if you have a state pension, it means that you don't get Social Security as other people do. I can't change the laws. I wish I could change the laws. I wish there was a switch that I could flip to help you.
Me too.
I know. But what I can say is that you need to be prepared for reality. And that means really having a good handle on what you can expect numbers wise, when you can expect it, when's the optimal time to turn it on, and how long you'll be able to continue to work in order to allow that pension to grow as large as absolutely possible. And so typically with the school retirement systems, there are people on staff you can sit down with and they can give you some guidance. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to do that, but if you haven't, I would say sooner is definitely better than later.
Okay, yeah. Somebody did mention to me that maybe I should start talking to HR, because I would like to kind of, like you said before, that retirement, I'd like to retire, but maybe not totally retire within 10 years. And this unfair law has been going on for 30 years in the state of Maine. So I just don't, I guess I really have to get into HR.
Yeah, I would get into HR, and then I would also talk to your colleagues, right? Particularly those colleagues who've already retired or who are closer to it than you are, because they've definitely started to strategize. And these are topics that we don't talk about often enough. But if you open up a conversation, I guarantee they'll talk to you.
Okay.
And
Awesome.
and they probably have some pretty good, collective research.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is a big, big thing for me.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. It's a huge thing for all of us. But my parents were teachers, so thank you for everything that you do.
Oh, well, you're welcome.
Chelsea, you've got a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, my company offers an HSA plan that it just gets deposited into a checking account.
Yep.
So I'm wondering, I was curious about instead doing diverting from them and doing a post-tax contribution into a Fidelity or a Vanguard and being able to invest in the market. But I'm curious, does me investing into the market because it's post-tax, does it wash any gains that I might make in the market?
So HSA funds are really powerful. You said it just sits in a checking account. Have you talked to the company that administers that HSA about whether they have an investment option?
They don't. It's like a 1% interest, basically. It's like a really local, it's through Bangor Savings, actually.
And do you have an opportunity to choose a different HSA provider? Like, could you opt not to have your money go there and have your money go into, Fidelity, which has an HSA?
I don't know. My impression is no, but I haven't actually asked that question.
Okay. All right. I would ask, and I would ask it in two different ways. So just for everybody's background, an HSA is a health savings account. And if you have a high deductible health plan, many of them offer the option to qualify you to open a health savings account. And a health savings account is kind of like a Roth IRA. The money goes into your HSA, you get a tax deduction for making the contribution. It's pre-tax dollars. The money grows tax-free. And when you pull it out, whether you pull it out while you're working or whether you pull it out in retirement, as long as you use that money for medical needs, you don't pay any taxes on it. So it basically, flowing money through an HSA basically saves you about 25 to 30% on all of your medical care, which is pretty amazing. I don't know how much they're putting into that account, Chelsea, but if they're not meeting your maximum, the question to ask is, can you just do it elsewhere? And if you can do it elsewhere, it should not have to be a post-tax contribution. You should, I believe, and I will look into this for you, but I believe you should be able to capitalize on getting the tax deduction and the growth as well. I'd also talk to your company about changing providers, quite frankly, because if people are going to amass money in these accounts, you want those accounts to work as well as possible. And there are more providers each year of health savings accounts. If the answer is no on that, I would probably just use the money that they put into my HSA in order to pay for my current year of medical expenses, or allow it to accumulate for when down the road in a year or two you have some significant medical expense that you need to pay for.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for being here. This is really wonderful to hear all the discussion. So I had two questions. The first question is, I'm self-employed. I'm a therapist. I'm a sole proprietor, and I was curious. I am married, and my husband has retirement accounts and pensions. I was curious if I will get Social Security because I've been self-employed so long. I have worked in other agencies and businesses and things, so I do have. Sorry, my daughter's in the background.
No worries.
So,
as long as you're paying taxes, Jennifer, you should be. I mean, self-employed is employed, right? So as long as you're paying employment taxes, you are eligible. As long as you're paying into the system, you're eligible, and your Social Security payments will be based on your 35 highest earning years. You'll also be eligible on your husband's work record, but depending on the difference between how much he earns and how much you earn, your own Social Security record may be more valuable.
Okay, that's helpful. And do you mind if I ask a second, or should I wait?
I don't mind. Go ahead.
Okay. My second question is, about a year ago, we or not even a year, we refinanced our house at a much lower interest rate, and we decided to cash out some of the money, the equity that we had in the house. And we really talked and tried to do it very safely so that we didn't overestimate the value of our house. So we felt pretty comfortable about that. And what we ended up doing is just putting it in our savings. And we thought that that was a really safe, accessible place to put that money so that, if kids had a larger expense like braces, or, we had other things, we could just really access it easily.
Mhm.
But I don't know, I guess in the back of my mind, I've wondered if we should be doing something else with it, but I don't really know what that something else would be.
Well, it really depends on what it's for. If was this money basically a fully funded emergency cushion?
I think we wanted to do some home improvements, but our kids play, travel sports and things like that. So things get very expensive, and it was always tighter before to be able to afford some of those things. So this, yeah, I mean, it does feel like a cushion. And then we wanted to be able to do some home projects and things like that. So, but it's earning, whatever the yucky interest rate
Yeah.
is, just in a savings account.
I'm with you. Yeah, no, I think, look, if this money is for shorter term needs, I know the markets have been going great guns, but putting it at in the market is not the right decision. Because
Okay.
we don't know when things are going to turn around. And the last thing you want is to put it in and then have the markets, drop 20% tomorrow. That would feel awful.
Right.
So I'd think about, is there a chunk of that money that is for longer term goals? If a chunk of that money is for college for the kids, then put it in 529s. If a chunk of that money is for your retirement down the road, then invest it in an IRA or a Roth. But if it's really for the home improvements, for the shorter term needs, I don't think you can afford to put it at risk.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah, no worries. Sometimes I look at my own life, right? And Linda, my story a little bit, but when I turned 40, I got divorced, I lost my job, and my father died. It was just a terrible year. And I was really starting over financially with the responsibility for my own retirement, of course, but also half of college for my kids. I wanted to, own a home. And I made a conscious decision at that point to live smaller. I did buy a home, but I bought a home that was much smaller than I could have qualified for. And I started just really socking money away. And that was a conscious decision to make up some ground. I look at a lot at the principles of the FIRE movement. FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. If you haven't heard it, you should Google it, because it's pretty trendy. But people who are disciples of the FIRE movement are less focused on the retire early part than they are the financial independence part. And they go to great lengths to save not 15% of their income, but 30% of their income or 50% of their income. They really live very leanly. And I'm not suggesting that you save 50% of your income. It's that's a really tough slog. But maybe you kind of curtail the lifestyle factors that you can curtail in order to actively sock away some more money. I mean, a lot of these things are choices, and we can choose to focus on tomorrow a little bit more than we are focusing on today in some cases, right? It's not always possible. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, then my advice would be very different. I think this is a very good market in order to get a job that pays a little bit more. I know the job market in Maine is not necessarily the job market in the rest of the country, and it, we're not talking Silicon Valley, but there are more opportunities, particularly remote opportunities, than we have seen in quite some time. And the pressures on employers to hire new people have also resulted in them understanding what it's worth to keep the people that they already have. So if it's been a really long time since you got paid more, if it's been a long time since you got a pay bump, it is time to tee that up. Patty said, I skipped her and she has some questions. I'm so sorry, Patty.
That's okay, thanks. And the conversation has gone a few different directions, so I think I'll just ask one question at this point. But so, or maybe it'll end up being two. Anyways, IRAs, there's a limit of 6,000 per year that you can put in, or is it 12,000?
6,000 a year, unless you're 50 and over. It may have gone to 6,500 a year. Hold on, let me check that. If you are 50 and over, you can kick in, 6,000 a year. And if you're 50 and over, you can kick in an extra 1,000 a year. So 7,000.
Okay. So
now, if you're self-employed, you can do something called a SEP IRA, and you can put in a lot more. But for a traditional IRA, those are the limits.
I'm not self-employed, but I think maybe my company, it is a SEP, it's a small nonprofit. They may have done a SEP IRA.
If you're not self-employed, like as an individual, you can't do a SEP. A SEP is if you have self-employment income, even if you have a day job, you can typically stash 25% of that money up to about $60,000 a year in a SEP IRA.
Okay, just want that. Okay, so at any rate, I'm already doing the 6,000.
Okay.
And I'm wondering, like, I do tend to put whatever raises I get, I try to put away. So that's going to happen in January. And I'm thinking, okay, now what? Because if I'm already hitting the 6, and I think I'm actually up to 6,500, where would be the next move to start putting more money in rather than regular savings?
So a couple of places. Do you have a health savings account available to you?
I do.
You want to look at contributing the max to the health savings account and then not using it every year. And the reason for that is the tax advantages that I talked about before are just as good, if not better, than an IRA. And if you put the money into an HSA, but you pay for your healthcare outside of the HSA, that HSA essentially becomes a supplemental retirement account. And when you get to retirement, even if you're not using the money for healthcare, it gets the same tax treatment as an IRA. So any money that you withdraw for healthcare never gets taxed. Money that you withdraw for things other than healthcare, once you're in retirement, gets taxed like 401k assets. But here's the best part. You need to start, if you're going to do this strategy, you have to start keeping a file of all the medical expenses that you pay for outside of the HSA. And what happens then is that when you withdraw the money down the road, you can repay yourself for all of those previous medical expenses and not have to pay any taxes on that money.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty huge.
That's incredible. I had no idea about that.
So that would be the next place that I would look. And then after that, I would look at just a discretionary brokerage account,
Okay.
a taxable account, basically.
Okay. And then somebody had talked, I've heard really bad things about annuities, but I heard a presentation on fixed rate annuities.
Yep.
Do you have any opinion on those?
Yeah. So I'm not an annuity hater. I think that you have to understand what you're buying. Fixed rate annuities are basically, or what they sometimes call immediate annuities, are basically just taking a chunk of cash and converting it to a paycheck that lasts the rest of your life. Very, very simple instrument. Now's not the best time to buy them because interest rates are so low, and the amount that you'll get from an annuity, like let's say you take $50,000 and you use it to buy a paycheck. The size of that paycheck is going to depend on your age. The older you are, the more that you'll get every single month, and interest rates. The higher interest rates are, the more that you'll get every single month. Interest rates right now are just terrible. So waiting to annuitize or annuitizing in chunks as you go through life, as your fixed costs grow, can absolutely work. But I wouldn't take off the table immediate variable annuities, which take the money and invest it in the market. You have to be careful. You have to understand what you're buying. Some of these products are much better than others, but if what you're looking for is some guaranteed level of income, they can be a decent way to go. Jean, did you have a question? You were waving at me.
I was, thanks, Jean. So with an HSA, can you pay for complementary medicine, or complementary health out of that? Like I spend about $1,500 a year in nutritional supplements that are recommended for, I do certain testing and so on. So stuff like that. Massage, any alternative kinds of things, or is it pretty much what insurance will usually pay for?
So nutritional supplements, yes. Over-the-counter products, yes. Massage, I'm not sure. And I would just, there are pages of this on the IRS's website, what's eligible and what's not. And
Okay.
you can search it. I mean, it was just this year that they approved menstrual products, right?
Hallelujah.
Right? Like Viagra's been approved for years, but Tampax only this year. Cindy, did you have a question? And Stephanie, did I miss you?
Yeah, you missed me.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I just had a question. So I'm going to be turning 60 and I do have a very small pension from a past job. You can take, if you take it at 60, it's like $611. And if you take it at 65, it's $873. Does it make sense to take it at 60 and invest it, or does it make sense to wait to 65?
So I'm going to actually put the math back on you because I can't do this math in my head. If you need to sort of figure out what the rate of return is that gets you from 60 to 65. So I would just go and put this into a calculator. If you Google the words, how much will my savings be worth? A bunch of simple savings calculators will come up on your website. All you have to do at that point is take the 611, plug in a rate of return. Let's say it's 6%. Let it run for 5 years and see if it gets you above or below that 873. Make sure you take taxes into account to see what that does to your outcome. Because if you get 611 at age 60, but you have to pay taxes on it, maybe it's closer to 450. That's the amount that you would have to invest. Cindy.
Just trying to like figure out, we're about 10 to 15 years away from retirement, and it looks like, taking your number of 85%, we're about on track to be hitting that point at about 62. So like, is there some like real compelling reason out there why I don't want to retire at 62? You know, I hear all of my friends that are older than I am saying, I'm going to work till I'm 70, and I'm not really digging that idea. So,
well, I think it depends. I totally get it. I'm married to a guy who retired at 62, and he wasn't digging it either. I think it depends on what you want to do with your time and how you would occupy your days. There's a field of research that shows that working makes us happier and healthier and keeps us young. And mostly it does that because it keeps us connected and involved. Loneliness is as bad for you as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And so if you have something that you want to do, I have friends who are retired who have incredibly full, active lives. I personally do not know what I would do with myself. And so for me, that is a sure signal that I should not be retiring yet. But if you have a plan, if you know what you want to do, if there are things that you would rather be doing, then yeah, retire.
and so retirement, I guess you're saying, doesn't necessarily mean stop working. But it does mean I can stop my high pressure, high stress job, but just find something I'd enjoy doing on a better basis.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, let me just ask you, do you have a financial advisor?
I don't. That's just like kind of my start at the beginning of that journey.
Okay. So we have on hermoney.com a resource. We've got a partnership with an organization called Wealth Ramp. A woman named Pam Kruger, who for years I hosted a show on PBS called Money Track, started this company, and she personally vets financial advisors. And she has built up a database of hundreds of them. If you go on our website, you can and click the button that says find an advisor. You can fill out our questionnaire, and we'll serve up the names of a few vetted fiduciary financial advisors that should fit your needs. Nobody's going to call you. Nobody's going to reach out to you, and we're not giving them any of your information. Making the contact is completely and totally up to you. But I've put a number of people through this process and helped them find advisors in this way. And I'm really, really pleased with how it's working.
That's great advice. You said it was hermoney.com?
Hermoney.com is my website.
Okay.
And there's a button on the site that says find an advisor.
I appreciate that. That's probably what I've been kind of thinking about this for 3 months now and didn't know where to start. So thank you.
Sure, absolutely.
And they're all over the country, I'm assuming.
Yeah, they are. They're all over the country. They're men, they're women, they're they get paid in different ways. So if you want somebody who will help you manage your assets, you can find one. If you want somebody who charges by the hour, you can find one. And they're a good bunch. All right. Well, thank you so much. This was great fun for me. I thank you for having me.
Always
Well, thanks,
wonderful.
Jean,
I
for
learned so
budgeting.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks
Thanks,
to
Linda.
Town
for
and
being
Country.
here. Thanks, Jean, for sharing your time with us again tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.